Hello and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week on the show, we are talking about the one and only the Maestro himself, Johnny Williams, or as he's mostly known, John Williams. First off, Mr. Williams, happy 93rd birthday.
Woo!
Congratulations to you, sir. 93 trips around the sun?
Yeah, that's a lot of them.
Oh, gosh. I could never. I hope, but probably not.
My Nana's 92. I went to go visit her, and then we were going through all of her CDs, and I was telling her about John Williams music, and she was like, she asked what I was going to record, and she said John Williams music. I talked about John Williams music, and I said he's 90, turning 93. She's just turned 92, and she goes, oh, call him up. Let's wish him a happy birthday. And I said, I do not know this man personally, and I do not have his phone number. So I'm glad we can wish him a happy birthday here in this public way. Hopefully he hears it, because John Williams, we do love you. Thank you for your contribution to arts and humanity. Genuinely.
First off, love that for your Nana. Also, going strong. Will I make it to the 90s? Will we make it to the 90s? Podcasting about Star Wars?
I hope not.
Imagine. That's what I want for us.
That's
going to be our
podcasting
continued
in our 90s?
Yes. While John Williams is creating the most iconic music of all time in his 90s, we're going to be creating the most unhinged podcast episodes of all time. And we're going to be like, oh, grad kids, I'm going on the interweb to talk about egg talk. And then they're going to be like, all right, Grandpa, let's get you back to bed about the egg talk.
Right. But the thing is, we're going to definitely have to be in the same nursing home. But because I don't think we're going to be able to figure out the technology. You know, by the time that we're 90, like it's going to be so over our heads. And our podcast is really just going to be a lot of back in my day. When John Williams did the music, it was a different time. You know, Star Wars is not what it used to be. It's a different thing now.
Back in my day, we had Star Wars movies.
Too close to home.
Too close. But anyways, speaking of Star Wars movies, Star Wars documentaries, that's why we're here today to talk about the Music by John Williams documentary. Came out in November of 2024, directed by Laurent Bouzereau, and we never got to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So here we are, because it is John Williams' birthday on the 8th of February, and this is now our second episode of the new year, which is very, very exciting. So welcome to 2025. So far, it's been hell, and that's why we're doing this, is to escape the hell.
So real,
just before an hour. Let's just escape.
And I gotta tell you, I really did escape into this documentary, because I was so stupid delighted the entire time. Big smile on my face as we went through John Williams's career and a little bit about his life. And I just loved hearing him talk about the music and seeing the joy in his face, and also just all of these filmmakers and people around him who have admired him and have collaborated with him over the decades. It was just a really, really nice documentary, you know, and that was so nice. like I feel like a lot of biopic documentaries are either like very heavy or like secretly heavy, and this one is pretty straightforward throughout, which I enjoyed. John Williams, American hero. Thank you.
I love the opening of this documentary, when you just think about how much music John Williams has put into our lives. It's just simply incredible. But when I finished watching this, I went back to playing some Destiny 2 for the night on my Sunday, as one does. And I had my headset on, and I just threw on like the Apple Essentials John Williams playlist, and I was just vibing to like all of the different hits, and I was like, this man, he's just penetrated our souls with music. How did he do it? Do it? Incredible stuff. We're going to talk all about the documentary, though. You know, overall thoughts, kind of the importance of John Williams in our life, and, you know, what his legacy will be long after he's gone. You know, God forbid when that day comes, I never want to think about it, but Oh gosh, he's left a mark. Speaking of leaving a mark on our lives, I want to know for you, like, what has been the impact of John Williams's music growing up in your life, and just like the power of his music without crying.
Why would you put that stipulation on me? I'm just a girl who is an emotional girl who really likes John Williams music. Thank you.
I just caught you
Um
in 4K. You're like, I was thinking about crying. I was just thinking about it.
like you can see the tears in my eyeballs. Like, wow, you really clocked me. It was really mean. Um, no, growing up, John Williams' music has always been essential. I got introduced to Star Wars pretty young. And, so his music was always in my life that way. And then in late elementary school, I went through a phase where I rejected pop music entirely. And I only listened to classical music and film scores. I was a very cool kid, very popular, obviously. And so the John Williams Greatest Hits 1969 to 1999 CD is one we owned in my house. And I listened to that CD pretty religiously. And it's very special to me still. Like, there are some movies on there that I haven't actually seen, but I could hum you the theme from it because it's so beautiful and interesting. And all of his music is just so dynamic. And I've had the great honor, the great pleasure, the great opportunity uh, being in the Chicagoland area to see him multiple times at the Chicago Symphony. And I really do think that's my greatest achievement as a fan. And my just some of like the genuine things that I'm most grateful for is the opportunity to see him conduct his own music. And I know that sounds like maybe a little ridiculous to say, but his music is so universal and iconic. And anybody who's listening to this podcast obviously knows his music and feels that as well. I would imagine that having the opportunity to clap for him in person is genuinely one of the highlights of my life. Um, you should also know that, like, in middle school or high school, I did a school project on him. We had to create like a cereal box of American Hero, and I literally did mine on John Williams.
I mean,
So
that is super based. Definitely,
so like
definitely a hero.
I'm really serious about my adoration for John Williams and his music. So getting to watch this documentary was just like a real treat. So yeah, that's what I have to say. I'm stepping off the soapbox now. Okay, and I didn't cry. Look at that.
I know. I'm really impressed. But
Gross.
we're emotional human beings here on this Friends of the Force.
It's tough out there. Let's
Yeah,
know.
yeah, it really is. To say like I love John Williams is an understatement. To say that he's had like an impact on my life is an understatement. I feel like the best way I can describe it, and this is like straight from the documentary without quite jumping into the documentary yet, was when he was describing the Over the Moon soundtrack, Over the Moon score from E.T. And he was saying, this is the closest thing that describes me. And I was like, oh wow. And people say like how do you describe yourself, right? And I've never really thought to say like if somebody asks me to describe myself and I send them like the throne room song from A New Hope, like when they get
Mm-hmm.
their medals, and I'm just like, that's me. That's how I would describe myself. And so now I'm thinking about it in that way of like John Williams's music has left such an imprint on my life that it is almost allowed me in moments of vulnerability to put my soul and my spirit like completely out in the open,
Mm,
whether I was in a coffee shop listening while, studying in college, or if I was in my bedroom one night feeling sad and listening to John Williams, and the way that I could still connect with myself despite moments of sadness, moment of fear, moments of even in moments of joy, and moments of anguish and worry. And John Williams is always that like anchor for me to be like, this is who you are, but realizing that through music and staying connected to who I am through his music. Which, like, I don't know if any of that made sense, but that quote in particular stuck out to me to be like, oh yeah, I would describe myself through his music because it speaks to my interests, it speaks to my hopes and my aspirations, and um and the things that inspired me in life, like filmmaking and like sports, all things that John Williams has penetrated through his music. I mean, when I hear that
Mhm.
we just had the Olympics.
Oh, I
You know,
know.
when
That
you hear
Olympic
that
theme
Olympic theme,
goes
like
so hard. It's so good.
you're like watching the most insanely talented athletes in the entire world compete at the highest level possible, and John Williams' music is blaring in your eardrums. Like, how is that not one of the most inspirational feelings, you know, to just see and feel that? Uh so yeah, his music is something. I just remember as a kid, my CD player that I'd carry around. I
Mhm.
had the Prisoner of Azkaban CD and the Revenge of the Sith CD in
Oh,
like
yeah.
2004, 2005. And like those two CDs were just always on me. Also, Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles, who are also one of the most influential groups of music in all time. So I was really
Mm.
going through it, you know, in my early days.
See, yeah, for me, it was like John Williams' greatest hits, 1969 to 1999. And then it was actually not John Williams, but episodes 5 and 6 of the Harry Potter, films 5 and 6 of the Harry Potter movies that for some reason I had on CD. And then a couple of like classical, but I would listen to that less than the film soundtracks. But those like 3 CDs I remember so distinctly. Oh, there's a girl group. They released like one album. They're called Nobody's Angel. Bangers, bangers. If you know Nobody's Angel, let me know. It was like the first CD my parents ever bought for me. It's great. But yeah. Anyway.
Don't you love that we lived in an era where CDs were still, it was so intentional what you bought? I mean, I guess now with vinyl coming back, people are very intentional, and like you have a bunch of K-pop CDs still, but I'm saying
I
like we were of the generation where it was like I can only fit so much music to take with me on a trip. I have to bring the right things that I want to listen to.
Man, you just completely brushed off the fact that I have a large CD collection now. You're like,
Very
well, it's
large.
just K-pop. It's just K-pop.
No, I didn't mean it
Um,
that way, but like I'm saying like you still collect CDs. I
I
collect vinyls, so like, you know, we're still
Yeah,
collecting
your
physical
vinyl
media.
collection is really nice.
But
I
like
have like
back in the
6
day,
vinyls.
not to put ourselves in the old age home too soon, but back in our day,
That's
you had
right.
to say, I want to take Rots with me on
Right,
my
right,
trip
right. We
or
couldn't
in the
we couldn't
car.
just search Apple Music routes. You know what? Thinking about CDs, you know what I was really upset about? I'll tell you. You don't have to wonder. You don't have to wonder for long because on my 2004 Ford Explorer that I learned to drive on, I love that car. It had a 6 CD player. I could throw 6 CDs in there and we just swap them out. Incredible. Best thing ever. I went to go grab a bunch of CDs to put in my 2015 Nissan Altima. 1 CD. And I was like, this is offensive. And now they don't even have CD players. You have just you literally, like in my dad's electric car, have a screen that is as large as my monitor. Genuinely, in the car, which is insane. And we shouldn't do that. I have a lot of opinions about this, but bring back CD players in cars. And I hope the car market knows they're only getting money from me once my old car.
Once my CD player is back.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm only buying used cars that have CD players. I'm so serious about it too. Like, once I'm gonna be so sad once my Ultima goes. I'm thinking about buying the same Ultima. Like, I need the CD player and I don't want a big screen. This is me in the old folks' home, please.
I remember getting an iPod. I almost call it iPad.
Mm-hmm.
iPod was such a big deal because also like all the John Williams music now I could take with me, all of it,
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and uh I had a Suburban growing up, so for me I had the CD player, but if I wanted to connect my iPod, I would have to like do a little cassette thing that plugged into the iPod, and then
Oh,
very convoluted. But yeah, John Williams' music always with us. Me running around my house playing Anakin versus Obi-Wan like on repeat. And I just had like a random piece of like crown molding that was like,
oh, that's
you
nice.
know, like a 12-foot long piece, and I would run around with it and pretend it was a lightsaber.
That's a little bit concerning, but I'm gonna brush it off. Why you could just pick up the crown molding. in your house growing up.
It was
But
like the
no,
piece that connects the molding to the floor, like the really thin,
no,
long piece.
I
Yeah.
know,
Not
but
like
you're
the thick,
still like
flat
picking
one.
it up and walking around with it instead of it being against the wall.
I know, but I think we did the floors and there was like an extra piece. So I was like, I'll just make
Got
it a
it.
lightsaber
Sure.
and play Johnny Williams' music.
He's trying to make it this is softer, like a less concerning thing.
I turned it
joke.
into my very own Youngling Slayer
Oh,
3000. Yeah.
oh, um,
When I was getting really
well,
emo as a kid and listening to Anakin's Dark Deeds.
oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. I get it. You're right. My bad.
Walking around the Jedi Temple like I'm, turning to the dark side.
Right.
I feel that. But no, in all seriousness, I think it had a profound impact on us growing up. I'm very jealous that you have seen John Williams in the flesh. I have not had the opportunity quite yet. Very sad. I never went to Orlando Celebration where he came out
Oh
and
my gosh.
played the orchestra and everybody was there except me.
Me neither. I wasn't there either. So do you know what we have to do? Did he conduct it? Did he conduct Obi-Wan too?
He did, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and we weren't there for that either. LOL. Okay, but what you got to do next time. So I was supposed to go see him in October at the Chicago Symphony, but he canceled because he had an illness. So typically when he cancels, he does reschedule eventually. So I'll call you up when that happens and you can come out to Chicago.
Thanks. I'll do that. I'll do that. Also, thank you for reminding me he was at Celebration 2022. I totally forgot about that until you just said it. So now I am sad again.
Sorry. Because he's only conducted, well, I'm going to make it worse. He's only conducted Obi-Wan, the theme.
Twice,
as far as I know. And I saw the second time. And when I opened the program to see it, and I was like, gonna cry.
Will John Williams go to Japan?
Probably. Well, there is alongside the documentary, there is a John Williams in Tokyo concert that you can watch on Disney Plus, and there's a CD of as well.
My tinfoil hat is he will show up and he will conduct Rey's theme because it's the 10th anniversary of Force Awakens and
that'd be beautiful.
And the Rey movie. So he'll be like, I'm back.
It'd be cool if he did. I'd really like that.
Doing the score again, and here is Rey's theme.
I'd bawl my eyes out. It's fine.
Yeah. And then we'd be not there because we missed the panel.
Right. by a stroke of no luck. So anyway, this documentary, I feel like it had a lot that we learned. I don't know. Did you learn things? Because I learned a lot.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize the extent to which his family was musicians, which I should have figured that, but seeing what his father, I think, was a drummer, and his mom an actress, I think, right? And so just the way that they were in like show business in general,
right?
And him mentioning that he didn't know there was any other career except being a musician growing up. He's like, to me, that's just what adults did. And I was like, that's so interesting to think like
that was so interesting to me.
You're set on that as a kid. Also seeing his high school photos like fucked me up a little bit. I was like, oh my God, it's young John Williams. That's crazy.
Right. He's only ever looked like old man John Williams to me, like within the past 15 years or so, right? He's kind of maintained a similar appearance. But yeah, I thought learning about his dad, especially, like he was a drummer and percussionist who played with Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey. Those are names. Those are names. I was like, oh, okay, all right. And then learning that how often he practiced piano, like 5 to 6 hours as a teen and young adult, and the fact that he was able to get into the recording studio for scores because his dad was like a session player young was so interesting to me. And of course it put him in the right moment and in the right environment to do exactly what he did, even if it took him a little while to get there. Even if he says that it was kind of a serendipitous thing that he ended up there, he definitely was in the right environment to learn and know what to do. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I think it also puts into perspective just the the sheer luck, all of the right things happened at the right time between him working with Spielberg and then Spielberg knowing Lucas and recommending John Williams, and Lucas having a very specific wants that symphony opera type of sound for Star Wars. And then Frank Marshall said like his dad was in the military with John Williams and they were in the band in the military. I was like,
Right?
there's
I was
just
like,
so
what in the
many
world?
so many small connections. Like if not for that, would we have gotten the iconic Indiana Jones music that we have?
Right.
And it's just so wild to see. There's just like there's one moment in the doc where somebody says, one score for John Williams would be like somebody else's like crowning life achievement, but like he's doing that every movie he does.
Yeah.
Like how does somebody keep that up and have such a variety and diversity of music, a portfolio of music, is just simply incredible. Like the range that he has.
Also, and I'm ashamed that I didn't know this. I didn't know that he spent time as a jazz player, and that he had a jazz band. I didn't know this, and I don't know why I didn't know this, but I didn't. And maybe it's because he went by Johnny Williams at the time. But I feel so ashamed that as a fan of him, I didn't know this. And I haven't actually listened to the album yet, but I'm really looking forward to it because I love jazz. I don't know if you knew this about me, chat, but I love jazz. And so, seeing that he ended up doing classic film score from jazz is really interesting. And there was this one of the Talking Heads interviews was a gentleman who was a radio host for a jazz radio, or what I assume was jazz radio. And he says, you don't make the Cantina song. You don't make the Cantina song if you don't know jazz. And I was like, you know what? He's so right for saying that, actually. He's so right for saying that. So
it really put the Cantina band into perspective. It's like, oh, that is very, very John Williams, and oh gosh, this man, simply incredible. I want to talk about maybe a couple of quotes that stuck out to us, like some noteworthy quotes, because I think there's some really, really good stuff in here. And the first one that I know we both shared was from Alan Silvestri, who is like another iconic score composer who did like Avengers and a lot of Marvel stuff. But he says music can keep a character on screen when they're not on screen. And duh. It's like a duh moment, but when you actually hear somebody say it and then you realize like, oh, like, of course, it's always ingrained in us that when we hear a theme of a character, when we're watching a movie, we think of that character, like it's association, it's object permanence, so, but to understand like how important music is and conveying what a character's thinking through those themes, right? Like Han Solo, we see Han Solo on the screen, but we hear Kylo's theme and we know Han Solo is thinking of Kylo, of his son Ben, right? And just like the importance of telling not only the story that we're seeing, but the story that we're not seeing, and I just thought it was like really cool to say that and to voice it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And specifically themes is, not all composers are working with the themes in the same way that John Williams does. And a lot of themes are much more subtle or I feel are processed. I don't know if this will make sense. Processed through the character differently. Like, I think we talked about this before when it comes to Andor and Nicholas Bertel's score for Andor, which I am a huge fan of course. But when we talked about that, and when we had the opportunity to interview him, the question I asked was talking about how Andor's score kind of goes through the brain of the character before it hits the audience, whereas John Williams' score like sit on top of the character for the audience. And neither of these are the wrong approach. Like they're just different approaches to my ear of the way that they sound to the audience. And the thing about John Williams's themes is because to me they sit on top of the character and adding another layer. They feel more um tangible as an item, as a single item, as like a piece of clothing the character is wearing, right? Like a vest, right? Whereas when I think about the Andor score, I can't necessarily hum the theme in the same way because the theme is kind of collapsed into the character, if that makes sense. I recognize it when I hear it, and I feel the character, but it exists in that moment as just like a manifestation of that character. Whereas John's music sits on top of the character, is an element that exists with the character and can be its own element in a very sort of tangible way for the audience. And I think that's what makes his music so iconic and so recognizable, and why we can hum 10 different themes from any of the Star Wars characters, and then can hum Jaws, and then can hum, Indiana Jones, or any of these other things he's ever written. And I think the way that he just approaches theme is super interesting.
Yeah, you make a great point. Just the breadth of characters also that he's written themes for. I don't think we see that as often in especially big IPs like Marvel. Could you really hum like the theme for Thor, like Thor's theme? No. I mean, the only theme I can hum from Marvel is Spider-Man's theme because Danny Elfman and Michael Giacchino are just legends. So like, of course, I know Spider-Man's theme. I know Batman's theme because of, it's Zimmer, right? And Elfman also,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that you get a theme for Short Round, which I didn't even remember that Short Round had a theme in Temple of Doom. Granted, I haven't seen Temple of Doom in a very, very long time at this point, and I need to rewatch it. But hearing Kiwi Kwan talk about how he went to the Oscars and saw John Williams for the first time since he filmed Temple of Doom, and they were humming Short Round's theme together, and Kiwi Kwan's like, of course, like how could I forget? Like I have a theme written by John Williams. Like what an honor that is. Like to
I
be like I have a
Yeah.
theme from Johnny.
Yeah, I loved that moment. I'm so glad we got that little snippet too, where he was like, "Of course I remember it," like that's so amazing. And it was such a genuine moment because I think his enthusiasm for his theme is something that us as fans feel as well. Maybe it's not our theme written for us, but we feel that same sort of thrill about his music throughout.
Yeah, totally. And I love just throughout this documentary, there was no stone left unturned across all of his films. Like hearing Superman's theme and Hedwig's theme, Marion's theme from Indiana Jones. Like every time I heard any piece of music, I just like got a little choked up, and I was like, oh god, this is so beautiful. I loved him saying, Hedwig's theme was the easiest thing in the world to write. I'm like, yeah, humble brag, John Williams, like Hedwig's theme. Come on.
Got it.
Like iconic piece of music, all thoughts of, you know, J.K. Rowling aside, that the score for those three films that he did are just some of my favorite pieces of music in that franchise.
hmm
Really, really good stuff. And yeah, what other quotes do you have that you wanted to share?
I have got a couple. One from J.J. Abrams, and this isn't the exact quote, but he said, "When you hear a new melody from him, it's a melody you're hearing for the first time that just feels inevitable." And that made so much sense to me, and I really thought he nailed that because when we think about any of his themes, it's immediately the right one and it's immediately the right music and it's perfect. Like, I can't think of a single way I'd change any of his music. I can't. These things feel inevitable. Of course, it had to happen like this. Of course, Saving Private Ryan had to sound like this. And of course, Jaws was always the low piano. And of course, Star Wars had this sweeping sort of feeling. And, of course, the Olympic fanfare sounds like that. That's the Olympics. These things feel so inevitable. And I can't imagine what it's like. And we got a little bit of that in the kind of beautiful moment when Steven Spielberg and his wife are talking about uh, having gone up to John Williams's like studio or wherever he was working at the time to hear the first score for Schindler's List, and how they were immediately so overwhelmed by that score. And the Schindler's List score is an absolute masterpiece, as is that movie. Um, but I don't think that those two pieces, the music and the film itself, have to exist together. They are so intertwined. It couldn't have happened any other way. But hearing just a little bit of their experience of hearing that music for the first time and just being so emotionally devastated by the melody, was like a very beautiful moment, because it's so human, but also gets at what JJ is saying with, of course, it had to be like that. That melody as it is so inevitable. And it evokes that emotion in you immediately because you know what it means, because that's the right thing to say.
Yeah, it's like you just know on some deep level that is how that moment is supposed to sound. That is the exact emotion I'm supposed to feel
Right.
because of like, and this music is telling me how to feel, and I know it's right
Well, I
in my
don't
heart of hearts.
necessarily think that it's like the music is telling you how to feel. Like music can be manipulative. Um, but to me, it's like it's not telling you how to feel. It's just expressing the feelings. I think his music to me expresses the feelings because the filmmakers that he's working with are already putting the feelings into the picture. Like music can be manipulative when it doesn't match what's happening on the screen. And so the music is making us feel something more than what the picture is giving us. And I always feel like the caliber of filmmaker that he works with and the way that he collaborates with people is um, just describing those feelings on a staff, with the notes.
Well, this actually leads me to one of my quotes that I wrote down from the legendary Chris Martin.
Which I thought was so funny. He was in this documentary. I was like, why are you here, Chris Martin? But then it came, and then we got it. But I was like, LOL, Chris Martin. Okay, please go ahead.
He said, the music and the image are equally important. One is elevated by the other. If you took one away, it wouldn't be what it is. And again, very basic, very, very rudimentary statement, but just sitting with that statement for a second here and just thinking about all of the moments in film that you've watched and you take the score away, do you have the same feeling? Do you walk away from that movie with it leaving an imprint on your mind and on your imagination? And the answer is most definitely no. Visuals can look great, writing can be good, and there are a lot of moments in films like the Saving Private Ryan Normandy beach
Mm-mm.
storm, right? Like there was no music during that because you let the sound effects, but I would say the absence of, or the music itself makes the absence of music that much more powerful. When you're hearing John Williams' score throughout Saving Private Ryan and you finally get to D-Day and there is no music and you're just sitting with war and the brutality of it and the water and the gunfire and the people dying and the ship, the metal of the ships, you're like, oh shit, there's no music. Hence, this is a really important moment. Like this is something I need to pay attention to. So, that being said though, like the image and the music being equally important, it is so true. And yeah, it just expresses so much. It's an art form.
Oh, absolutely. It's and like the way that these things go together is amazing and crazy to me sometimes too, because sometimes like composers are not they don't necessarily yet have the final cut of the film and they're writing the cues, and then that's crazy to me. I don't know how anybody does that. That people are
Yeah.
filmmakers, editors, composers. Wow, beautiful stuff. But yeah, having to kind of express everything that's happening on screen and to actively choose when to not express through music and to actively say, actually, no, this is would be better served by silence or the sounds on screen alone. And I think that's something that um, he's great at too, because like, what if Padme's ruminations, that scene, didn't have the score that was so haunting and eerie? Or what if the binary sunset moment didn't have that sweeping score? When they played the alternate cue for that, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And then you play the iconic cue and you're like, that's it. That's what it was, like that's what it should have been. That's perfect. But yeah, kind of knowing when to be silent and when to speak up with the music is just kind of an incredible thing as well. And yeah, I just want to go watch every single John Williams scored movie ever now.
Well, let's look real quick. So his Academy Awards, he has so many. He's
Oh
been
yeah.
nominated for 54, which I think that's the most, right? He holds the record for the most Oscar nominations for any living person. And the second most nominated person in Academy Awards history, behind Walt Disney, who has 59.
Oh
So
man.
he needs to get
Oh,
five more.
that's crazy. Only behind Walt Disney, like the guy. That's
Wild,
wild.
wild.
That's
Um,
wild.
he won for Fiddler on the Roof, Jaws, Star Wars, E.T., and Schindler's List. So
Mm.
his most recent nomination was for Indiana Jones, Dial of Destiny, Fablemans, and all three of the Star Wars sequel films. So even the sequels, you can say what you want about him. You can say what you want about him, but those scores, iconic.
You
Last Jedi score,
literally
the best.
you literally cannot deny Ray's theme. Like they started playing that on this documentary and I was crying again because I was like, my God, this theme is so good. You can tell he loves to write for Daisy Ridley, and we know he does because he's said as much, and it's my favorite thing ever.
Right. And also the moment when Luke walks out of the base on crate towards the AT-ATs, and it's like
Mm.
dun 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 dun, and it's playing that. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Anyways, but yes, I hope we get one more from him, which we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But did you have any other quotes that you wanted to talk through?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got another one from our best buddy, Chris Martin, lead singer of the band
Oh,
Coldplay.
look at that.
And he says, this is a good closing one. I know we're not closing yet, but he says, I think it's important to celebrate him just to say thank you for that amount of joy. And the reason, the context for Chris Martin being in this documentary is that for the Music of the Spheres tour, see, which if we had recorded this after April when I'll see Coldplay, then I would have gotten the reference immediately of like why he was in the documentary, but I didn't. And then they told me and I was like, ugh. But basically the band walks out through the audience up to the stage to E.T. And I think that's very sweet. As we go into their Music of the Spheres, which is a very ooh world. I don't know how to this is not a video podcast, but like Music of the Spheres is kind of a little experimental and funky at times as pop music goes. But also it's planets. My Universe, if you have My Universe, BTS and Coldplay, it's like there's aliens in that music video. Anyway, so it's a good music video. It's fun.
Learn something new.
They're like music is outlawed and they're doing music anyway across the planets, and it's great. Anyway,
I do
it's
love
important
music and I do love space.
you should
Hence why we're here.
watch the BTS My Universe Coldplay music video. Anyway, to reiterate the quote, to go back to the point, I think it's important to celebrate him just to say thank you for that amount of joy. And that is how I felt at the end of this documentary, was what we did as viewers, as the filmmakers, as everybody they did talking head interviews with. And it felt like a beautiful tribute to him, and it felt like a beautiful portrait of him. And I do agree that it's important to say thank you for that amount of joy because the world is so difficult and the world is so inclined to be the worst often. And I don't think that anybody, I think this is another Chris Martin quote, but I think it's Chris Martin. It says like, nobody can have a worse day after you listen to John Williams' score.
Hey, you took
And he's
my
right.
next quote.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No,
We're
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
We're gonna transition into it. But like,
it's a good one. It's a really good one because it's so true.
It's a good one, and it is true. I think everybody has a story. Everybody has a story when it comes to a film that was composed by John Williams that has affected their life in some way. So for so many people, that's the original Star Wars. For so many people, that's Jaws. And for so many people, that is Harry Potter. For so many people, it's Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List or any of the in-between films, right? Any single film. Lincoln. Like, Lincoln's score is beautiful. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Literally any of these scores. And he's done that across generations. For me, enjoying John Williams music is something I do with my family. And their entrance into his music and my entrance into his music are different, but we still come together because we love all of it, because we have memories to share across all of it. And I think that is such a gift because how many things in this world are just fundamentally good like that? You know, how many things can you think of there where everybody's got a memory and it's a positive one?
Not many.
Not many.
Not many at all.
Not many.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who can say no to the Imperial March? Nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. Truly. And that actually, you mentioned that quote from Chris Martin, which like I agree, it's a great one, and I will say like, who amongst us hasn't put on a John Williams theme when they're feeling sad and they pretend like they're the main character in their own life? Like, who among us hasn't turned on the Binary Sunset and looked at the sunset because we've had a bad day? We've all been there. I know you have, listener. I know you have. I have.
But it's like, who hasn't dreamed or healed because of his music in little ways and in big ways alike?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like the range of his music, every single emotion you can attach a John Williams different piece of music to. Like, I'm even thinking like Home Alone, right? Like when they played the Home Alone theme in this documentary, and
oh my
like
gosh,
just coming off of Christmas a month ago, and immediately in my head I'm like, family, Christmas, I miss my wife. I want to, because she lives not near me right now, not because she's gone. I'm to be very clear.
To be clear, like she's within driving distance. Like, we're good.
Yeah.
But like she's not living right there right now.
Yeah, she's not living here, but she is living.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I like the feeling of family and loved ones, and like how special Christmas time is. And it's like immediately the moment you hear that music, you're thinking a billion different thoughts. Your brain is firing faster than you can even process anything. It's just it's like the atoms in your brain are exploding and just doing its thing, and it's incredible just what music can unlock. And thinking of John's music throughout my time in college, I don't know if I would have graduated college without John Williams, because pretty much whether I was studying or reading or writing a paper very late when I shouldn't have been, I was always listening to every Star Wars score, the originals, the prequels, and then I got a Force Awakens score, and then I was listening to that, and that was pretty cool to get that in college. It's gotten me through so many hard times, and yeah, you never have a worse day, as Chris Martin says.
Right. What is your most, what is the piece of Star Wars score that you most associate with studying?
Oh, I can tell you right now.
Do it. That's what I'm asking. I'm asking you the question, so I would like the answer, please.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I have so for those of you who like have Apple Music, where like there are the Star Wars scores on Apple Music, but they're not the real scores. They're not the extended scores. If you try to find the like actual extended scores like online now, they're like gone. So unless
With
you
like
own the
about of all of the
CDs,
cues. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like the complete recordings. It's like a 3
Right.
so if you get like The Empire Strikes Back right now on Spotify, and you go to like the main one, it is a 1 hour and 13-minute score.
Mhm.
So if you go to the actual like complete recording of The Empire Strikes Back, it's 2 hours and 4 minutes. So it's like almost another full hour of score. And my go-to was called Carbon Freeze, Darth Vader's Trap, Departure of Boba Fett. And it's 11 minutes and 50 seconds.
That's beautiful and a better answer than I could have hoped for.
Because you get such a range of music in there. You get
Mm.
the carbon freeze chamber, Darth Vader entering music. You get Luke walking through the halls of Cloud City, super confused and like the mystery of that. And then you get the triumphant, it's like kind of triumphant, kind of tragic moment where Boba Fett is flying off and Leia is looking and sees the ship and she knows Han is on that ship. And so it's this like tragic theme that you hear when they kiss, but now it's playing and you're like, oh, it's the theme. And now she's missing him. She's not kissing him. She's missing him. And it's like such a different evocative feeling, but it's the same exact
Mhm.
piece of music. But because of the
Mm.
way the visual and because of her Carrie Fisher's emotions, it's like the music and the image are equally important, right? Like
Right, right.
same piece of music tells such a different story 11 minutes apart, right? Um
And
anyways,
it's
I
and it's and it's
yeah.
now it's the soundtrack, it is the story of your college studying.
Oh yeah, I mean those 3 complete recordings for the OT, I was all over it, but I think Empire Strikes Back was definitely the most. Also the um A New Hope score, which is also 1
Mhm.
hour 46 minutes. It has a 17-minute archive bonus track for the Binary Sunset alternate. 17 minutes.
Ooh.
So it's just straight up raw footage of John Williams like conducting the orchestra and like it literally has like the stops and the starts and him talking and I'll have to send it to you. It's so good. It's so good. Sorry. You asked you
Oh,
you
no.
really you really opened
No.
Pandora's box there for me to
I
yap.
no, that's literally exactly what I asked for. I'm so delighted by this answer because like there are songs like that I have associate with very specific things. Um and yeah, like I've maybe told this one before, but Miley Cyrus's album like this her song See You Again, I associate with um the Percy Jackson books specifically because I would listen to that CD while I read Percy Jackson books, specifically the red covered one. This is very specific. But like so I have those moments where it becomes so intertwined with something that it was never necessarily intended for. But I think that's a beautiful thing because we're putting our memories into the music too. And that's how music lives on. We music is such a universal thing, but also such an individual experience. And I think that it's a very magical thing. When you go to a concert, you're among other people who are listening to the same music, but might have a completely different reason for loving that song, have a completely different reason for it being in their lives than you do, but you both get to be there together. I think that's really special. Like the same way, like music in theater, like it only happens that way once. Like that's special. Um, but the way that we imprint our memories on that moment, that piece of music, I think is cool.
Yeah, that's such a really important point to make is just I think music is the one thing that can transcend time and space.
Mm,
You know, we listened to a
yeah.
piece of music hundreds of years ago, and we will listen to that same piece of music hundreds of years from now if we're not all underwater. Uh, and yeah, for you to listen to a piece of music and for you to teleport back to a specific moment to say, I know what I was wearing, I know where I was, I know how I felt. Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm just reiterating all things you said, but like
No, no, no. But
it's so
like
important.
and it's one of those things you're right that we can also understand amongst each other beyond like boundaries of language as well. Like so much of our history is in the written word or is in objects, right? And so the written word is difficult, right? Because language changes all the time. So how Shakespeare wrote, we have to interpret Shakespeare in order to understand what Shakespeare was really saying. And then we can understand the emotions of what he was saying because the emotions of what he's talking about are also universal. But we have to do some work to get there. Same with the objects. We can maybe understand that what we're looking at is a figurine, but maybe we don't understand the importance of that onto the culture that it came from. Maybe because those people aren't alive or they didn't document it in a different way, and or that's the only artifact that we have. But with music, because it's so directly tied to emotion, we can it's a universal kind of language. We can all understand the emotions, and it can tell us something about the people who experienced it, who wrote it. And I think that goes for film score music too. Like we can talk about, like if we listen to a piece by Mozart, it'll tell us something about the time in which he lived and maybe the way that he thought. And we can also understand the emotion of the piece. How does it make us feel? And yes, like film score, like John Williams's work exists within the context of a particular story that is fictional. But the way that he writes scores is different than the way that Nicholas Britell writes scores or Michael Giacchino writes scores or any other composer writes, then Hans Zimmer writes scores. Like these people all have different perspectives. So the way that we hear John Williams' music through the context of these stories can still tell us something, one, about the moment in time that it came out and the story that it's talking about, but it can also tell us a little bit about him and his influences and the kind of music that he values, the sounds that he values, the instruments that he finds compelling, and the emotions that he wants to talk about. Yes, he's still doing it within the context of Steven Spielberg's story or George Lucas's story or whoever, right? But if he's pulling out a thread that maybe in the picture is a little lower, is a little less obvious, and then we understand that character better because he decided the way that somebody gazed at somebody else needed to be expressed in a certain way. We have an understanding of what he's looking at, what he's thinking about when he's writing the music. And so I think that's really compelling. I think it's really interesting.
And that makes me think of one of Spielberg's quotes where he was saying how like John scoring, John is seeing the way that Steven sees the movie, and then now Steven is seeing the way that John sees the movie, and it's like, oh, that's like such a brilliant partnership. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case for all composers, because there were some interesting tidbits in there about how some composers or some directors really just wanted to sound like a specific temp track that they put in, right? Which like
I love. Yeah.
No, like with John Williams, like we don't do temp tracks. Like you let the maestro do his work and he gets it, right? Like, and then you don't say no when he gives you a piece of music. It's like, no, that's right. That feels right. And that kind of leads me, and we're talking a lot about how this music is just so important to our lives and how it imprints on us. And Seth MacFarlane, super bass Seth MacFarlane, in this, he says John's music connects with his audience on such a primal level. It seems like these themes have been with us forever. And he's kind of talking about like, the collective psyche and how it's almost like, when I try to think about the first time I heard John Williams, it's not like I can necessarily pinpoint it. And I think that's what it is, right? It's like you think of the Jaws score, right? Even if you've never seen Jaws, you know, dun 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 dun, and that is something. How many pieces of music are like that? Or the Star Wars theme, or Indiana Jones. Like these things just are baked into our brains, whether we want it to or not.
And everything feels like a classic. I was thinking about Ray's theme. So I was like a senior in high school when Force Awakens came out. But it's weird for me to think about the fact that Ray's theme didn't exist in my life before I was like 17. It feels weird to me that I didn't grow up hearing Ray's theme. Because I listen to that theme and I know it. Like I fundamentally know it. in my heart and my soul, I know that theme and it's beautiful. And I'm thinking about the way that it feels and the sands of Jakku and the way that it moves and it's whimsy, right? Like, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's always existed in my mind, but it hasn't. It's only been there for a decade.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the incredible thing about his music in particular too, is that, and I think that's kind of what Seth MacFarlane's getting at, is that everything felt like it has always been there. Everybody, we've all had the Star Wars theme since we were born. There's never been a time before the Star Wars theme or before the Jaws theme or before the Harry Potter theme, even though there was a time before those things and people lived a lot of their lives before they heard that particular song. But then it's like, oh no, we all know that song. It's always been there. I sang it on my birthday, you know, when I was 2. No, you didn't. Like, it didn't exist.
It's like, yeah, I knew Duel of the Fates. No, you didn't.
Lies. Duel
I
of the
knew
Fates
it when
has
I
always
came
been
out
there.
of the womb. No,
Exactly.
you
I mean, but that's how
didn't.
we feel about his music, because that's, I mean, one, that's the power of something like Star Wars, but that's specifically the power of his music. And like, when people talk about their Star Wars fandom, they often talk about the first time they ever encountered Star Wars. Like, this is a theme. Like, there are entire Star Wars podcasts that are like, when was your first encounter of Star Wars? I mean, it's a question that we ask to like all of our guests because it feels like it's always been there.
Oh, gosh. Well, that maybe leads us to our last quotable here, unless you have any other ones that are significant you would like to highlight.
Well, I've got a point. It's not a quote.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for permission. I appreciate it. I really thought it was interesting that George Lucas knew of John Williams, but as a jazz pianist and not as a film composer at the time.
Oh, yeah.
That Steven Spielberg recommended him. And I thought that was so interesting because it means like, obviously, like, he was known in the business and around people who appreciated music and stuff like that. But it was so fascinating to me. Again, this inevitability of his music, the fact that it's always been there, right? That where there was a time where he was not known for his composing work, that there was a time when he was just known as being jazz pianist Johnny Williams, and him and George Lucas being like, that's not the guy. No, it was the guy. That was the guy. That's it. That's my whole point.
Well, and thinking, now you got me thinking of George also saying, you know, I wouldn't have made the prequels if I knew John Williams wouldn't do the score. Imagine a world without the prequels for 1 second.
It's the worst thing ever.
It's
like
the worst thing ever.
I mean,
yeah.
there are like lots of bad timelines, but I think a timeline without Revenge of the Sith specifically is a bad one.
Right.
Or the pod racing, or literally all of the Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones, I love you so much.
It's also really interesting too that, speaking of Star Wars, I didn't realize his wife passed away.
Mm-hmm,
you know, and he was really struggling, and he said, like, you know, right after she died, he went on to have like the best 3-year stint he had ever had up until that point, which was Jaws, Star Wars, and Close Encounters back to back. You know, all nominated for Academy Awards. 2 of them he won them for. And it's so, and him running the violin score, concerto for his late wife, and how he was saying she had always wanted him to write her a piece of music, and only once she wouldn't be able to hear it could he write it, you know? And that makes me think of the quote that we end the documentary on, which is, music is enough for a lifetime, but a lifetime is not enough for music. Which, that had to sit with me for a while, because it's a really hard-hitting one. And the way I interpreted it was, you know, music is enough for a lifetime, meaning music is enough to satiate us. It is enough to fill us to the brim with joy. It is enough to carry us through like every emotion. It is something that's so fundamental, so primal, so instinctual that anybody connects with music. Every single person. It's just whatever music that they prefer. But a lifetime is not enough for music, just meaning there's so much music out there, you know, but also the fact that music will exist and grow and uh prosper long after we're gone. Like we cannot hear all the music. Like think of all of the brilliant music that is going to be created, all the iconic scores. Hopefully none of them are generative AI once we die.
Right. Right.
But
Or while
like
we're living.
or while we're living, yeah. But all the music that will live long past us and make an
Mhm.
impact, you know, and that's it's an incredible thing to think, and that's why I said like music transcends time and space. Um, the music of Star Wars will be felt 200 years from now. Like we will have been alive during the time of the Last Jedi score, and somebody 200 years from now is like looking at the Last Jedi score like it's Beethoven, you know, and
We're
that's
already looking at it like it's Beethoven.
like
Move aside, Beethoven.
it's just it's wild. It's so wild. How did this quote sit with you?
I loved it, and I'm kind of reiterate what you said, but I think he really hits on it. Like music is the life force of living, right? Like music is something that keeps us going. Any kind of music, all music. But music is bigger and broader and more powerful than any of us, and it will endure. And there's no way we can individually capture all of human existence and all of humanity's soul in our own lifetimes. Um, but it will always continue on, and it will always be bigger than us. And I like that too, because kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, like we can go listen to a piece by Beethoven or Bach or Wagner or Mozart or whoever, Strauss, um, Chopin, and understand them a little bit better. Uh, but we can't know all of music. We can't experience all of music in the way that it is meant to be experienced because we do not live forever. And I think that that's just a really interesting, it's an interesting way to put it, but it's also so fitting. Like, I don't know. Music is really, it is like
Transcendent.
transcendent and omnipresent and, and like all of these things. And yeah, I obviously really like music. I've always really liked music. And I'm very grateful for his scores and the way that music has enriched my life. I also did choir, still do choir, you know? So like making music is really important to me too.
Yeah, I would say to anybody out there, if you're not religious, I think the next closest thing to believing in God and going to church is listening to music. I mean, there's a reason music in church is such a big thing, right? Because it's meant to elevate your spirit. It's meant to connect
That's a
you
good pull, Brad.
spiritually to something that
Mm-hmm.
is omnipresent that you just said, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
God.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way to speak to God. I'm not religious by
Mm-hmm.
any means, but that's the way I interpret the role of music in religion is like it's a voice, it's the voice. It's the way that we
Yeah.
connect with
Yeah.
something we can't tangibly connect to. So if you don't believe in anything, believe in music. You know,
Yeah.
as well I'll leave it there.
No, I think you're totally right about that. There is something very spiritual about experiencing music. And I'm gonna tattle on myself here. And I mean, I'm an emotional girly, and I'm also somebody who's willing to embarrass myself on the podcast more than a little bit. Um, but when I hear live music, and not necessarily pop music, but music that's like theater or orchestral or film score or any of these sorts of well, sometimes pop music too. Uh, any of these sorts of things that you know you really feel uh moved by when you listen to it in your headphones. Then you see it in being that music being made in real life. I cry every time I see live music. There is a point where I just feel so grateful to be in the room where whoever is making the music because it requires also somebody writes the music, sure, but then maybe that person arranges it or maybe somebody else arranges it. And then it gets sent out to maybe the musicians. Maybe there are a few of them, maybe there are a bunch of them. And then they work on it to make it perfect. And then you hear it in that moment. And there's a certain majesty to that, like genuinely. And so I think you actually really got it. And I did grow up
Damn.
religious. So shout out to my non-religious pal over here, or my more non-religious pal than me. No, that was really good.
I know.
Yeah.
I really pulled that one from the memory banks.
Also, shout out to churches. I gotta say this. I gotta be really honest about this. There are some churches out there that just have really good acoustics.
Yeah.
Where like you're like,
The
maybe I
organ.
don't.
The
You're like,
organs
I
are
don't
always
know
good.
if I believe in God, but I am having a moment right now. Like the way that the music is bouncing in this particular space, they were really doing something when they built this building. They really did that on purpose, and they do it on purpose.
I know we're getting close to time here, but I wanna ask you one final question as we look forward to the role of John Williams in Star Wars specifically.
You know what? You ask the question and then you answer it.
Uh, maybe. We have not gotten a movie in almost 6 years. We are supposed to get a movie at some point. I personally feel, after having 2 standalone films between Rogue One and Solo, both of which I adore and love, not having an opening crawl is felt. It is a void. Not having a Star Wars film since The Rise of Skywalker, which is the last time we got the opening crawl on screen, it is a void in our lives. And I want to know from you, are we heading the right direction where we should not, we should make this opening crawl like this special thing? And I don't know if I would extend it necessarily to all TV, but in terms of any film that hits the big screen, knowing how long it's been since we've gotten a film, we might only get one Star Wars year in 10 years. Like, do we want that one Star Wars movie regardless of what the content or the story is? Do we want John Williams' opening crawl? Because I personally feel like it is a void in my life that I have not been able to sit down and hear John Williams' score with the big Star Wars logo. And I think it's a very missed opportunity to not feel that. That's me going to church. That is me seeing God,
Right.
is seeing those 8 letters on screen just pop. And the moment of silence after a galaxy far, far away, right? Like,
Right.
what are your thoughts?
I don't know if I feel as passionately about this specific thing as you do. So I'm glad that you shared your you got up on your step
Old man
stool and said
yells
what
at
you had to
cloud.
say. No, not old man yells at cloud. That's petty. Like that's pettier. It's gonna be pettier if it's old man yells
Oh,
at
okay,
cloud.
okay.
But I know exactly what you're saying. Like I get it. And not getting it in the anthology films is like a little funky. It seems like we definitely have moved away from it. And again, like I do love that we're getting music from a variety of composers. But yeah, it is like the quintessential, when you think of Star Wars, you think of you know?
Yeah, like when you
So-
sit in that seat with your tub of popcorn, you want to hear that blasting in your ears. And like the collective breath of everybody in the theater between that blue font and between the yellow font, and just like
Mhm.
the deep breath, and we're about to go into whatever this is. You know, like regardless of how much I did not like Tross, you know, we went into it knowing something was amiss, but we still felt that moment of like, okay, here we go. And I don't know. I feel like I'm
I get it.
missing that.
I hear you.
I hope we get it. I hope we get it.
I hope so too.
Do you think he's going to score the Rey movie?
If he's feeling up to it and if he gets enough lead time. Because he writes less per day than he has in the past.
I'm hopeful because he did Dial of Destiny, so
Yeah,
he's
that
still
was pretty
doing
recent.
he's still doing stuff for Lucasfilm. They
Yeah.
just
He definitely like hasn't, those relationships are still there. It's just
yeah.
whether the timeline that they give him is something he completed in, because I have no doubts about his ability to continue to create beautiful music. But last time that I saw him in concert, he talked about how he writes less per day than he used to. Like he can write a couple minutes of music per day. And it used to be a few minutes or whatever, you know?
Lucasfilm, please hurry up and make a goddamn movie.
You know
Because
what?
we're up against the clock if you want Johnny back to write
He's
a
got
score.
a solid, you know, he could have a solid decade on him still.
He might. He
My
might.
Sister Jean. She's 105.
Incredible. I hope
I know.
John Williams is just writing music to 9900. Let's go. Let's go, bud. I
Yeah.
love that he is kept busy though. It seems like maybe that's the secret to life, is just continuing to foster creativity, continuing to put your pen to the page and just stay busy and keep your brain working and not lapsing into inactivity. You know, people retire and they go quickly off the decline, right? Like John Williams is still
Some
writing
people.
music. Yeah, some people, but like that's
Makes sense.
typically when you see it as like even like a high functioning person when they retire.
Wow,
You know-
you're really calling out retirement here.
I'm
as if
calling out
people
my
aren't
dad.
Retiring. Oh, okay.
Take it from
Okay, Dad.
experience.
Well, my
Yeah.
parents are great. But I think what you're really saying there is, Sarah, we have to do the pod until we're 90, because
Yes.
if we don't do the podcast, we're gonna lose our brain cells.
we might have
That was the
dementia.
subtext.
Yeah.
That was the subtext I was getting from that, and it felt a
Uh-huh.
little pointed. But I mean, I get it.
Let's assume Ludwig is doing Dave Filoni's film and Mando and Grogu. That's just a given.
Are those two different films?
Those are those are two different films.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I guess.
I definitely have learned that information before, but I don't retain it.
Yeah, because remember Mando and Grogu is where Jeremy Allen White is gonna play a ripped Stinky the Hutt,
Stop.
who's a gladiator apparently or something. I don't know.
Everybody's playing a big prank.
This movie is written by ChatGPT.
Ugh.
Which, you know, but we have a James Mangold film.
Well, yeah.
And we have a Charmin Obaid Chinoy Ray film, which also just got a new writer. So John Williams loves Ray. John Williams just scored a James Mangold film for Dial of Destiny. Maybe the man comes back for both. Maybe he's feeling a little something about Star Wars.
He does really love writing for Daisy Ridley. Like, genuinely really loves writing for her.
Save me, Ray theme 2027 revised, reborn. Save me, James Mangold film written by Beau Willimon, scored by John Williams. Save me. This is a call for help. Help me. Help us. You're our only hope, John Williams. Tying it all back. Tying it all back.
You got it. Beautiful work. Beautiful
My last
stuff.
question for you, Sarah.
Oh, no.
John Williams, I mentioned it at the very beginning of the pod where he
Yeah.
said, this is the closest thing that describes me. What is the closest thing that describes you when it comes to a single piece of John Williams music?
You really couldn't give me that one before the podcast, so I could
know,
go look.
I thought about it, but it would make some good content to watch the
So we're just
panic,
gonna.
to watch the panic creep in. And it's okay. I'm not going to hold you to this answer, forever.
He definitely is, guys. He really is.
You can name like a top 3 if you want, maybe like what it's in your top 5.
I'm a big fan of. Okay, actually, I'm going to expose myself big time here. Okay, no, actually, I'll give you a couple. General Grievous from
Ooh.
Rots.
That's a good one.
It's a little like heavier than like I identify with. But when I think of like some of my favorite stuff and some of what I love. So I've actually never seen the movie Hook. That's my confession. But the Flight to Neverland theme is so perfect and whimsical and beautiful. That's one I think about a lot. Let me pull up John Williams' greatest hits 1969 and 1999 because that's where we're gonna find more. I'm just gonna vamp because I feel like I have to give you all the answers now. Because I feel like I'm gonna fail otherwise. If you had given me some ability to prepare for this, I would feel a little less stressed about what's happening right now.
Yeah, now we're going to be here for like another 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm also actually. I know this is your fault though. You did
It
not
really
prepare
is.
me for this. Jeez Louises. Yeah, Hook's Flight to Neverland. I also really love the 7 Years in Tibet theme. Again, not a movie I've seen, but it's on John Williams' greatest hits, 1969 to 1999, and it's so beautiful. I also just really like the prequels. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
The prequels are great.
Stop, hold on. Stop. Keep it in. Jurassic Park theme. The Jurassic Park theme. The Jurassic Park theme.
That's super
We didn't talk
base.
enough about Jurassic Park on this pod.
We
but
really
the Jurassic
didn't.
Park. And I'll be honest with you. I love the Jurassic Park theme because my dad loves the Jurassic Park theme. But that in itself is a good thing, right? Because I love my dad. He's a good dude.
Yeah.
We enjoy his music together. So Jurassic Park theme for sure.
Nice. Oh, that's
Thank
a good
you.
one. That's a really, really good one. I'll keep it simple and I'll just say for me.
Okay. You're making me look bad out here.
The Indiana Jones theme. That's just iconic. But I would say like the number one is Yoda and the Force theme. Because just whether it's the more kind of gentler version or it's the very triumphant, like lifts X-Wing out of the water, like that to me, that moment is elevated to such a new level because of the music and because Luke is doing this amazing thing and it's this score, it's this moment. It's like, how did he do that? And to me, it just speaks to the Force and the ability to, if you don't have faith in anything, have faith in anything, like have faith in something that, you know, things can happen that are great and things in your life will be good. And you can achieve great things if you believe in yourself enough, right? Like, so to me, that's like kind of the pinnacle John Williams score moment. It's so good.
I hear you. And I love it.
So good.
Great choice.
All right, Sarah. On that note, I think we've come to the end of our journey here with Johnny Williams, at least for this podcast.
For this particular moment, but
Yeah.
not all the moments.
Not all the moments. Music is enough for a lifetime. So we'll continue to hear the beautiful music of John Williams the rest of our life. And we'll continue hearing a lot new Star Wars music inspired by John Williams because he has paved way for so many future artists to lend their instruments, lend their voice to Star Wars, and that is an incredible thing. John Williams lives on in many different forms. So thank you, listener, for tuning into this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope that you were thinking about a lot of the ways that John Williams has impacted your life and influenced your soul, your very spirit, because it's definitely influenced ours. But you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, you name it. Follow us on Blue Sky, where we're primarily posting now, and leave us a review if you enjoyed the episode. Come back next time. We got a lot more. Check out our episode with Molly, our friend Molly, last week on Skeleton Crew. We got a lot of stuff coming up in the months ahead for Star Wars. Big trips. And by trips, I mean one singular, to Japan.
Well, I was also going to say to Planet X.
Also to Planet X.
Also Planet X.
Indeed. We got a lot to cover.
Yeah. That's right. So thank you to our friends who are funding our trips. And by trips, I do mean to Planet X specifically. And those are our patrons. So thank you so much for your support to help keep the podcast running. We are so grateful to Brian, Ben, Cheryl, Clay, Comet, David, Emma, Jennifer, Katie, Nate's a friend, Krista, Logan, Lucy, Lindsay, Matthew, Nicole, Rob, Ruth, Santa, Soul Catcher, Sky Talkers, Tom, Travis, and our newest patrons, Jules, Vita, Glyph, and Andy. Thank you all so much for your support. And thank you to everybody who's joining us in this music-filled episode. There's less music in the episode than there is in a Star Wars movie and also documentary. So go watch a John Williams composed score movie and go watch a documentary if you haven't already, because it's lovely. And stay healthy, stay well. Thank you for listening.
And stay hydrated, most importantly.
That's right.
Drink water. I
helps.
know you listening to this episode have not drinking water today, so drink it. We're drinking it right now.
Literally, we both just did. So
we both did
stay
it.
hydrated.
So now you
Stay
have to do
hydrated.
it, listener. Thank you all for coming and joining us on this journey. And until next time, may the force be with you always.